The rusted nail dug into the plaster, carving the final mark into the wall that had become my entire world. 729 days of staring at damp concrete and smelling hopelessness. Tomorrow wasn't just another Tuesday. Tomorrow was the day the cage would open, and the hunter would finally become the prey. Trapped by my husband in a state penitentiary for 2 years because of his mistress, watch how I took my revenge and turned them into homeless drifters the very day of my release. The cell walls were clammy, smelling of a mix of old cement, dried sweat, and rotting hope. However, for Victoria, that wall was a giant calendar. With the tip of her thumbnail, rough and slightly jagged, she traced a small vertical line near the leg of her iron cot. The line was almost invisible if you didn't look closely, but for Victoria, it was a tiny signal of victory. 729 days. Tomorrow would be day 730, the day of her liberation. Victoria breathed deep, filling her lungs with the stale air of the Bedford Hills Correctional Facility. She sat cross-legged on the thin mattress that had been her home for the last 2 years. Before this, she slept in a king-size bed with Egyptian silk sheets in a luxurious estate on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. Before this, she was the wife of Gavin Montgomery, a promising real estate mogul. Now, she was just inmate number 304. The memory came back like an unstoppable tide. The flashes of the press cameras in the courthouse, the condescending look of the Superior Court judge, and there, on the witness stand, Gavin, sitting with a white shirt impeccably rolled up, his face tilted in a perfectly feigned sadness. "I loved my wife, Your Honor." Gavin's voice trembled then. "A performance worthy of an Oscar. But I cannot justify her actions. She pushed Chloe out of jealousy. She killed our future child." Then there was Chloe, Gavin's personal assistant, and at the same time, his mistress. Chloe, sitting in a wheelchair, her face pale, without makeup, deliberately designed to look pitiful, while she held her flat stomach. Crocodile tears fell down her cheeks as she pointed at Victoria with a shaking finger. "Mrs. Sterling screamed at me that I was a whore." Then she pushed me down the stairs. I felt the blood flowing. Lie. It was all a lie. That day, Victoria did go to Gavin's office to demand an explanation about the infidelity she had discovered, but she never touched Chloe. It was Chloe who, hysterical, stepped back and slipped, or perhaps threw herself on purpose, down the emergency stairwell, which was only covered by one security camera. The recording from that camera, strangely, got corrupted during the crucial minutes, leaving only the image of Victoria at the top of the stairs with an enraged face. 2 years sentence. A felony for aggravated assault causing the death of a fetus. When the judge's gavel banged down, Victoria's world collapsed. She saw Gavin hug Chloe, consoling that viper, but in that embrace, Victoria caught a split second where Gavin looked at her, not with guilt, but with a cold and calculating stare. The look of someone who had just eliminated the obstacle to a multi-million-dollar inheritance. They thought breaking me would be easy, like snapping a dry twig, but they forgot that pressure turns coal into diamonds. Victoria, daydreaming again. A raspy voice pulled her out of her trance. It was Barb, her cellmate, a middle-aged woman locked up for a Ponzi scheme. Victoria turned with a neutral expression. During these 2 years, she had learned to shut off her emotions. Tears were a luxury she couldn't afford in this place. "Just counting, Barb," Victoria replied in a low voice. "Tomorrow you walk free." "If I were you, I'd be thanking God until I had a bruise on my forehead." Barb laughed while folding her prison uniform. "But you're weird, Vic. You're too calm. Like someone going to pick up groceries at Whole Foods, not someone leaving hell." Victoria sketched a faint smile, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Because the real hell isn't in here, Barb. The real hell is out there, waiting for me." Victoria stood up, smoothing her blanket. "And this time, I'll be the one holding the match. 10 in the morning, visiting hours." The sound of the heavy steps of the corrections officer echoed in the hallway of the block. Normally, this was the most awaited hour for the inmates, the hope of receiving a package from a relative or simply seeing the face of their children. But for Victoria, this hour was a test of patience. "Victoria Sterling, you have a visitor." The officer, a heavy-set woman, yelled from the other side of the bars. Victoria didn't move from her position, reading a book in the corner of the cell. She didn't even lift her head. "Who?" she asked, although she already knew the answer. "Who's it gonna be? Your faithful husband and his young lady," the officer mocked. Despite her toughness, the woman felt a certain sympathy for Victoria. The whole prison knew how diligent Gavin and Chloe were with their visits. To an outsider, it looked like an act of responsibility and repentance, but the officers who often saw their interactions knew something didn't add up. "Tell them I'm sick. Or dead." "Whatever," Victoria replied coldly, turning the page of her book. "Vic," Barb whispered, "it's the last month. Tomorrow you leave. Why don't you see them one last time? Maybe they're bringing you some money." Victoria slammed the book shut. "I don't need their money, Barb. Besides, they don't come to give. They come to take." The officer sighed. "Mrs. Sterling, Mr. Montgomery says it's urgent. He says it's about your late parents' assets, that they're going to be seized if you don't sign today. He's brought a notary." Victoria laughed, a dry, cutting laugh. "Tell the Honorable Mr. Montgomery," Victoria said, staring fixedly at the officer, "that my hands are cramped. I haven't been able to hold a pen in 2 years because I've been too busy washing inmates' laundry. If my father's assets are seized, so be it. Let it all burn." The officer shook her head, giving up. "You are incredibly stubborn." "All right, I'll communicate that you refuse to see them again." When the officer left, Victoria leaned her back against the cold wall. Her heart beat forcefully, not from fear, but from contained rage. Every month, for 24 months, Gavin and Chloe had come. At first, they arrived with sweetness, bringing good food, pretending to want to reconcile. Gavin said he was forced to imprison her by public pressure and Chloe's family. But Victoria knew that a week after her admission to prison, Gavin tried to liquidate a fixed-term deposit in Victoria's father's name worth $3 million. The bank refused because it needed Victoria's signature as the sole heir. From that moment, their visits turned into psychological terror. Gavin begged, then threatened. Chloe cried, then mocked. They needed that signature. Gavin's business empire, which seemed magnificent, was actually rotten. His main capital had always come from the fund injections of Victoria's father. Without Victoria, Gavin was nothing more than the captain of a sinking ship. There is a profound power in silence that screams louder than any tantrum. "Wait," Victoria whispered to the void. "You won't have my signature. You'll have me." In the air-conditioned visiting room, Gavin Montgomery loosened his tie abruptly. Cold sweat beaded on his temples. "Did she refuse again?" Gavin asked, almost shouting, when the officer returned alone. The officer nodded indifferently. "She says her hands are cramped, sir. She can't sign. That damn crazy woman." Chloe, sitting next to Gavin, slammed her Hermes bag against the table. "She does it on purpose. Gavin, do you know that the company audit starts tomorrow? If we can't liquidate her father's trust fund today to cover the hole in the balance sheet, we are finished." Gavin massaged the bridge of his nose, which was throbbing. His face, usually handsome, now looked older than his 35 years. The last 2 years had been a logistical nightmare for him. He thought getting rid of Victoria would make things easier. Victoria was a homebody, submissive, or at least that's what he thought. He thought that by putting her in prison, her spirit would break and she would sign anything in exchange for getting out early or getting better conditions. But the Victoria in prison had turned into a rock. She rejected sentence reductions, rejected privileges, and worst of all, she refused to yield power over the assets of her father, William Sterling. Even though Gavin already controlled the operations of his father-in-law's company, without the legal ownership of the shares, he couldn't mortgage the vital assets to get new loans. "Calm down, Chloe. Don't scream here." "Yes or yes, Gavin." "That I calm down. You ask me to calm down." Chloe glared at him, her beautiful face distorted by panic. "The developers of the Skyview project are already claiming the third payment. If we don't pay next week, the project halts and the media will smell the carrion, Gavin. And remember, tomorrow she walks free." Those words hung in the air like poison. Tomorrow she walks free. And so what if she walks free? Gavin tried to sound sure, although his heart wavered. She's just an ex-convict. Who is going to believe her? Her reputation is destroyed. The label of baby killer will chase her forever. We'll pick her up tomorrow. We'll take her home. We'll lock her up, pump her full of sedatives until she signs. Are you sure? Chloe looked at him with doubt. She's been silent for 2 years, Gavin. Her silence is scary. She's never made a scene. She's never begged. She simply refused. She has no one, Chloe. Her father is dead. Her fortune is blocked. Her high society friends have abandoned her. She'll walk out of here like a hobo if we don't take her in, Gavin struggled to convince himself. Gavin stood up, adjusting his jacket. Let's go home. Let's prepare the script for tomorrow. Call the journalists. We'll create the narrative that we are a compassionate family welcoming back the wayward wife. That way, if she tries anything, the public will think she's an ingrate. Chloe snorted but followed Gavin. As they walked toward the black Mercedes waiting for them, they didn't realize that their seemingly perfect plan hung by a very thin thread about to break. The night fell over the prison, bringing a chill that soaked the bones. In the small library, rarely visited by other inmates, Victoria was sitting across from an older woman with short white hair. It was Martha Halloway, a famous ex-lawyer imprisoned 5 years ago, used as a scapegoat in a corruption case involving a high official. Martha was Victoria's unofficial mentor inside. "Ready for tomorrow, darling?" Martha asked. Her voice was raspy but full of authority. Victoria nodded. "Mentally, I am ready, Martha." "But what about the documents?" Martha smiled mysteriously. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small contraband USB drive. "My protege, Mason, already has everything secured on the outside," Martha whispered. "He is brilliant, like I was when I was young. He has tracked the flow of funds from Gavin's company." Gavin was careless. He used a shell company in Panama to launder the project money, but he put his mother's name as director. An amateur. Victoria's eyes shone with coldness. And Chloe's medical proof. "Safe," replied Martha. Mason managed to get close to the nurse who attended Chloe. Turns out the nurse kept a copy of the original medical record that wasn't destroyed. Chloe suffered a spontaneous miscarriage 2 days before the incident on the stairs due to an overdose of illegal diet pills. She was already bleeding when she left the house. Victoria clenched her fists under the table. The truth was painful, but also liberating. She had never killed anyone. The guilt that had tormented her in the first months vanished without a trace, replaced by the embers of a revenge that burned brightly. "Thank you, Martha. I don't know how I can ever repay you." Victoria's voice trembled. Martha patted her hand. "Pay me by winning, Victoria. Win for all of us, the ones who have been silenced by arrogant men and a corrupt system. When you walk out of here, you won't be the naive Victoria anymore. You will be the CEO of your own life." Martha leaned in. "Remember our strategy. Don't attack directly. Let them feel superior first. Let Gavin believe he still has control. When he lowers his guard, when he feels safe on his throne, then you pull the rug out from under his feet. First step. Asset freeze," murmured Victoria, repeating the plan they had mapped out for months. "Exactly," Martha nodded. "Based on your father's original will, the one you left in the safety deposit box of another bank, and which, luckily, Gavin didn't know about, you have absolute veto rights. As soon as you get out and activate your status before the board of directors, every cent that leaves the company accounts will need your approval." Victoria imagined Gavin's face when his credit card got declined. A faint smile returned to her lips. "One more thing," Martha added, face serious. "Be careful. Gavin is cunning, but Chloe is reckless. Desperate people can do crazy things." "I already died once 2 years ago, Martha," Victoria replied calmly. "They can't kill someone who is already dead." Her last night, Victoria couldn't sleep. She spent it packing her few belongings: some books, a toothbrush, a change of clothes she wore when she came in, and a small crumpled photo of her father. She distributed the rest of her soap, shampoo, and some food among her cellmates. An emotional atmosphere wrapped cell number 12. "Don't forget about us, huh, Vic?" Barb said with teary eyes. "I won't," promised Victoria. "I'll come back, not as an inmate, but as someone who will help you with your case, Barb." At dawn, Victoria stood in front of the small cracked mirror over the sink. She contemplated her reflection. Her hair, once long and manicured, was now cut to shoulder length and somewhat rough. Her skin wasn't so soft anymore. There was a hardness in her features. Her eyes, once soft and full of love, were now dark and deep like the ocean on a stormy night. She wasn't the sweet Mrs. Montgomery anymore. She wasn't William Sterling's spoiled girl anymore. Prison had stripped her of all her naivety and weakness, leaving a core of indestructible steel. She touched her chest. Her heart beat steadily without fear. There was only a sharp focus. Outside these walls, Gavin and Chloe were probably sleeping peacefully on a fluffy mattress bought with Victoria's father's money. Or perhaps they were nervous thinking about the audit, unaware that a hurricane was heading toward them. They thought the Victoria walking out tomorrow would be a broken woman, ashamed and poor. They thought they were picking up a wounded sheep. How wrong they were. The cell door would open in a few hours. Victoria put on her old white shirt, the only decent garment she had. The shirt now fit somewhat loosely on her thinner body. She buttoned it up to the neck as if putting on armor. Victoria sat on the edge of the bed, waiting for the sound of the key turning. She whispered a promise to herself, a promise that would be the fuel for every one of her steps from that instant on. Gavin, Chloe, enjoy your luxury breakfast this morning because it will be the last decent meal you'll be able to swallow in peace. The metallic sound of the lock resonated. The cell door opened. The hallway light spilled inside. The game had begun. The morning sun shone brightly in the prison's outer courtyard, as if it wanted to burn away the sins locked behind the concrete walls. However, the heat of the sun was outmatched by the heat of the camera spotlights. Gavin Montgomery waited by the exit gate, dressed in a perfectly tailored dark blue Armani suit. Beside him, Chloe, in a discreet ivory white knee-length dress. Her hair pulled back in an elegant bun, holding a bouquet of white roses. They looked like a couple cut out of a Happy Family magazine, if you ignored the fact that they were waiting for Gavin's ex-wife to get out of jail. "Do there have to be so many journalists?" Chloe hissed in a low voice, maintaining a rigid smile for the cameras. "They have to be," Gavin replied without looking at her, waving briefly to the crowd of reporters. "We have to control the narrative from the first second she sets foot outside. The headline has to be, 'A faithful husband receives his repentant wife,' not, 'Ex-con seeks revenge.'" Gavin looked at his watch, valued at tens of thousands of dollars. His heart beat with unease. He hadn't slept all night thinking about the audit starting today. Did he need Victoria's signature before lunchtime? Or would the bank start freezing his operating credit lines? "The door is opening!" shouted one of the photographers. The rumble of the old iron gate sliding broke the tension. All lenses focused on the dark opening. Little by little, a figure appeared. Victoria Sterling. She didn't walk with her head down, as inmates usually do, ashamed upon release. She walked upright. Her steps were firm and measured. She wore a simple white shirt, a bit big, and faded jeans, the same clothes she wore when they arrested her 2 years ago. Her hair, shoulder length, framed a sharp face pale from lack of sun. No makeup, no jewelry, but something was different. Her eyes. Victoria's eyes scanned the crowd of journalists and stopped on Gavin and Chloe. There was no longing, nor sadness, nor even explosive anger. Her look was empty, but sharp as the barrel of a rifle about to fire. Gavin swallowed hard. He took a step forward, extending his arms with a moved expression he had rehearsed in front of the mirror. "Victoria, honey, finally," Gavin said loudly so the microphones would catch it. "Welcome back. We are here for you." Chloe advanced a step behind Gavin, offering the flowers with a trembling hand. "Sister, we've prepared your room at home. Let's start over, okay?" The cameras flashed frantically, capturing the moment of reconciliation. Victoria stopped 2 steps from them. She looked at the white roses as if she saw a dead rat. Then she looked at Gavin. The corner of her lips lifted slightly, forming a crooked and chilling smile. Walking past them felt like walking through a ghost. They were already dead to me. They just didn't know it yet. She said nothing. She simply stepped to the side, walking right past Gavin as if he were a lamppost on her path. "Victoria!" hissed Gavin, his voice turning sharp as he realized she was ignoring him. He grabbed her arm. "Don't make a scene. Get in the car now." The grip was strong, painful, but Victoria didn't wince. She looked at Gavin's hand on her arm, and then his eyes. "Let go of me," Victoria said in a low voice. Her voice was raspy from disuse, but her coldness soaked into Gavin's bones. "Or I scream in front of all these cameras that you are hurting me." Gavin, surprised, let go of her arm by reflex. Victoria resumed her march, leaving Gavin and Chloe planted, with a ridiculous expression and empty hands, in the middle of a crowd of journalists who started whispering in confusion. "Where is she going? She has no one," said Chloe, seized by panic. Her voice started to rise, breaking the image of the elegant woman she had built. Victoria kept walking toward the main road. Gavin tried to follow her, but his steps were stopped by the soft roar of an engine approaching. A gleaming black Rolls-Royce Phantom pushed its way through the journalists. The car was ostentatiously luxurious, in stark contrast to the dust of the street in front of the prison. Its license plate wasn't just any plate. It indicated its owner had access and power. The car stopped right in front of Victoria. A uniformed chauffeur got out quickly to open the back door for her, but it wasn't the chauffeur that left Gavin jaw-dropped. What froze him was the figure of a young man in an impeccable suit who stepped out of the passenger door and bowed respectfully to Victoria. Mason Brooks, the young lawyer with a degree from Harvard, famous for winning impossible cases against giant corporations. Gavin had tried to hire Mason for his legal team last year, but was flatly rejected. What was Mason doing here? For Victoria. "Good morning, Ms. Sterling," Mason greeted with a clear and respectful voice. "Following Ms. Holloway's instructions, everything is ready." Victoria nodded briefly. "Let's go, Mason." Before getting into the luxury vehicle, she turned one last time. She saw Gavin, face red with anger and shame, and Chloe looking at her with disbelief. Victoria didn't wave. She simply got into the car and the door closed with a solid, dull thud, separating her world from theirs. The luxury car drove away, kicking up a cloud of dust that hit Gavin's face. "Mr. Montgomery, Mr. Montgomery!" The journalists now surrounded Gavin like sharks smelling blood. "Who picked up Mrs. Sterling? Whose car is that? Is there a third person? Is the reconciliation canceled?" "No comment," barked Gavin, losing control. He pushed a microphone away and yanked Chloe's hand sharply. "Let's go." Inside his own luxury car, which now felt cramped and hot, Gavin punched the steering wheel. "Who was the bastard who picked her up?" he screamed. "It's Mason Brooks, Gavin!" Chloe's voice trembled with fear. "The expensive lawyer. Where did Victoria get the money to hire him? Her accounts are empty. We checked." "I don't know." Gavin started the engine abruptly. "But wherever she goes, we have to find her. I need that damn signature today." Meanwhile, in the quiet and cool Rolls-Royce, Victoria reclined her head on the soft leather seat. The scent of expensive leather and sandalwood air freshener replaced the stale smell of prison. "Where are we going, ma'am?" asked Mason politely from the front seat, watching her in the rearview mirror. "To the refuge, Mason," Victoria replied with her eyes closed. "I want a shower. I want to wash off the traces of their contact." The refuge turned out to be a penthouse on the top floor of the St. Regis in Midtown Manhattan. This property was one of the many hidden assets of Victoria's late father, not registered in the books of the company Gavin managed, but in a private trust fund that only Victoria could access upon turning 30 or under certain emergency conditions. Her wrongful imprisonment had activated the emergency clause. Victoria stood under the stream of hot water in the spacious marble bathroom. Steam filled the room. She scrubbed her skin with a rough sponge, as if she wanted to rip off the layer of epidermis that had touched the prison air, that had been touched by Gavin. Finally, the tears broke out, mixing with the water. It wasn't a cry of sadness, but of release. Washing off the scent of confinement feels like shedding a skin you never wanted to wear. She cried for her 2 stolen years. She cried for her father who couldn't see her free. She cried for the child she never carried in her womb, but was accused of killing. After an hour, Victoria stepped out. On the king-size bed was a selection of new clothes prepared by Mason's team in her size. Not the pastel and girly dresses Gavin liked, so Victoria would look like a submissive wife. The selection was bold, modern, and imposing. Structured blazers, high-waisted trousers, silk shirts in navy blue and black. The colors of power. Victoria chose a pristine white suit with an asymmetrical and elegant cut. White not as a symbol of purity, but as a blank canvas, or perhaps as the shroud for Gavin's career. While she buttoned the jacket, Mason knocked on the door and entered with a thick stack of documents. "Excuse the interruption, ma'am. The estate attorney is already waiting in the living room. We need your signature for the total transfer of powers over your father's holding." Victoria sat at the vanity, allowing a professional stylist, also prepared by Mason, to cut her hair into a sharp bob that framed her determined features. "Read me the key points, Mason," Victoria ordered while contemplating her new reflection in the mirror. Point 1. Mason opened a blue folder. "The power of attorney you granted to Gavin Montgomery 3 years ago is revoked." Point 2. Your status as majority shareholder with 90% of the shares is activated. Point 3. All assets, both movable and immovable, in the name of the company or affiliated persons, are frozen for a forensic audit. "Proceed," Victoria said succinctly. "There is one more thing." "Ma'am." Mason hesitated a moment. "The bank has informed us that Mr. Montgomery is requesting an emergency withdrawal of $1.2 million this very afternoon, using the deed of a property in the Hamptons as collateral. The deed is in your name, but he possesses the old power of attorney." Victoria swiveled her chair to look at Mason. Her face, now with light but firm makeup, looked fearsome. "Let him request it," Victoria said coldly. "Let him feel victorious until the last second. Then, cut his access just when he's about to swallow the bait." Victoria stood up, slipping on blood-red stilettos. The sound of her steps on the marble floor resonated like the strike of a judge's gavel. "I'm done being the victim, Mason. Now show them who the real owner of all the luxury they enjoy is. Money is the only language people like Gavin understand." While Victoria plotted her war strategy, Gavin was trying to bail water out of a sinking ship. At the headquarters of the Sterling Group, which ironically was located in a building owned by Victoria's father, Gavin paced from one side to the other in the boardroom. In front of him, 3 main investors looked nervous after seeing the morning news. "Mr. Montgomery," one of the investors cleared his throat. "The news this morning. Your wife refused to come home with you. Will this affect the dispute over asset ownership? We heard the land for the waterfront project is still in her name." Gavin laughed. A laugh too loud and forced. "Ah, Mr. Garrett, don't believe cheap gossip. My wife, Victoria, well, 2 years in prison have affected her mental health a bit. She was ashamed to face the media, so she left quietly in a car from the mental health clinic I hired. She needs time alone, so the assets are safe." "Safe 100%, insisted another investor. 100%, Gavin lied fluently. "In fact, this very afternoon, I will sign the liquidation of fresh funds to accelerate our project. You have nothing to worry about. Victoria is an obedient wife. As soon as she calms down, she will sign everything I put in front of her." Chloe entered the room with a tray of coffee, playing her role of efficient assistant again. She smiled sweetly at the investors, but her eyes betrayed panic when they met Gavin's. When the investors left, appeased with promises, Chloe slammed the tray against the table. "Are you crazy, Gavin? Mental health clinic. What if journalists investigate it? We don't even know where she is." "Shut up, Chloe," barked Gavin. "I'm buying time. The bank just called. The verification for the withdrawal of the $1,200,000 is in process. As soon as the money is in our account, we pay the suppliers, secure our position, and then look for Victoria. If necessary, we'll hire some thugs to bring her home." Gavin's cell phone rang. A notification from the bank. Verification process in its final phase. Gavin sighed in relief. "See, the old power of attorney still works. Victoria is a fool. She didn't go directly to a lawyer upon leaving. She must be crying in some corner." "Tonight we have to celebrate, Gavin," said Chloe, starting to calm down. "To relax nerves and to show the public we aren't worried, let's dine at Le Bernardin. Invite some high society friends." "Good idea." Gavin nodded, adjusting his tie. His confidence was returning little by little. He felt he still had control. He had always beaten weak Victoria. Why would it be different this time? They didn't realize that on the other side of the city, a certified courier was delivering a document to the headquarters of that bank. a document with the letterhead of the law firm Mason Brooks and Associates, attaching a notarized deed from 5 minutes ago. The restaurant Le Bernardin buzzed that night with New York's elite. Crystal chandeliers shone warmly. Soft jazz music floated in the atmosphere. Gavin and Chloe were seated at the best table in the center of the room. Chloe wore a new evening dress she had bought that same afternoon, of course, with the company credit card. They were surrounded by 2 other couples, business partners they were trying to convince. "So it's true that Victoria has mental problems?" asked Mrs. Vanderbilt, a socialite fond of gossip. Chloe put on a face of feigned sadness. "Yes, dear. It's a shame. This morning she didn't even recognize Gavin. She had hallucinations. The doctor says she needs intensive treatment. We are very worried." "You are saints," praised Mrs. Vanderbilt's husband. "Still taking care of the woman who tried to kill your child." Gavin smiled humbly, raising his glass of wine. "Family is family, sir. I could never abandon Victoria. Let's toast to a better future." The glasses clinked. Gavin felt victorious. The narrative had been controlled. The money would arrive tomorrow morning. Life was returning to normal. "Excuse me, sir." A waiter approached with a card machine in hand to charge for an extra bottle of Dom Perignon and the dinner bill. Gavin pulled out his black platinum corporate card with a nonchalant air. The card was linked directly to the main company account with an unlimited limit. "Go ahead," said Gavin without looking at the bill. The waiter inserted the card, waited a moment, and then frowned. He tried again. "I'm sorry, sir. The card has been declined," whispered the waiter politely. The laughter at the table ceased. Gavin's face turned red. "Impossible. Try it again. Maybe your machine is broken." The waiter tried again. A long and painful beep sounded. "Still declined, sir. The reason is contact issuer. Use mine." Chloe quickly took out her credit card. An additional card on the same account. The result was the same. Declined. Cold sweat began to run down Gavin's back. The guests began to look at each other uncomfortably. "Maybe there's a problem with the bank's system?" Gavin tried to laugh, but it sounded hollow. "One moment. I'll call finance." Gavin walked away from the table, hands shaking, as he dialed the number of his company's CFO. "Hello, Mr. Ramos. Why aren't the corporate cards working?" "Did you forget to pay the bill?" Gavin barked in a whisper. Watching arrogance drain from a man's face is a dish best served in public. On the other end of the line, Mr. Ramos's voice sounded panicked and breathless. "Mr. Montgomery, I was just about to call you. It's a disaster, sir. All company accounts have been frozen." "What do you mean frozen?" "An order just arrived from the SEC and the IRS. There is a total blocking instruction at the request of the new majority shareholder based on an asset embezzlement clause. And, sir, the $1.2 million we requested this afternoon, the operation has been automatically canceled." Gavin's world flipped upside down. New majority shareholder. Who? "Ms. Victoria Sterling." "Sir," replied Mr. Ramos in a low voice. "Her lawyer just sent the deed of change in the company structure. You have been removed as CEO as of 5 this afternoon. All your access has been revoked." Gavin dropped the phone. He turned toward the large window of the restaurant. Across the street, a giant screen in Times Square that normally showed cosmetic ads suddenly changed. It was breaking news. On the screen, Victoria's face, beautiful, firm, and powerful, was giving a press conference at a podium. The volume of the TV at the restaurant bar was turned up by other customers. I, Victoria Sterling, as the legitimate owner of the Sterling Group, announced today a total restructuring of management. We have found evidence of massive embezzlement of funds over the last 2 years. As of today, I assume full control and will take legal action against the parties that have harmed the company. On the screen, Victoria looked directly at the camera, as if looking directly into Gavin's eyes, who was paralyzed inside the luxury restaurant, unable to pay his bill. All eyes in the restaurant focused on Gavin and Chloe. The whispers of admiration for the saintly family transformed into looks of contempt and mockery. Gavin felt his knees go weak. It wasn't just a declined credit card. It was checkmate, and Victoria had just moved her first pawn. The next morning, New York woke up with an explosion. Not of a bomb, but of information that destroyed a reputation in seconds. In her penthouse, Victoria enjoyed a cup of chamomile tea while looking at her tablet. Mason was sitting across from her, smiling with satisfaction. Trending topic number 1 on X, Instagram and TikTok, informed Mason. The hashtags Truth4. Victoria and Montgomery scandal have already reached 2 million mentions in an hour. Victoria slid her finger across the screen. An anonymous account managed by Mason's investigation team had published an explosive file, not mere rumors. It was a high-resolution scan of the original medical record from Mount Sinai Hospital, dated September 23rd, 2 days before the incident on the stairs that led Victoria to prison. The document read clearly: Patient Chloe Reed, diagnosis: spontaneous incomplete miscarriage due to consumption of dangerous chemical substances. Dietetic supplements. Procedure: emergency D&C, September 23rd, 11:45 p.m. The document proved that when Chloe fell down the stairs on September 25th, her uterus was already empty. There was no baby that Victoria had killed, only the drama of a manipulative woman who used her own medical tragedy to get rid of the legitimate wife. Across the city, in the luxurious estate that once belonged to Victoria, the atmosphere was tense. Gavin smashed his mobile against the wall, breaking the screen. His breathing was agitated. His bloodshot eyes looked at Chloe, who was curled up on the sofa, face pale as wax. "Explain it to me." Gavin's voice was low, trembling with an anger about to explode. "Explain to me why that medical record says you lost the baby 2 days before Victoria came to the office." It's fake, Gavin." Victoria forged it. Chloe tried to deny, but her voice cracked. "Don't lie to me anymore," shouted Gavin, approaching and grabbing her by the shoulders. "I just called the hospital director. He's terrified. He says the file is authentic and was stolen by a trainee nurse." "So it's true. You had already lost it because of your damn diet pills, and then you faked a fall so Victoria would go to jail." Chloe broke down crying hysterically. "I was scared, Gavin. At that moment you said if I was pregnant you would divorce Victoria, but I lost it. I was scared you would leave me if you knew the baby was gone." Then Victoria arrived, furious. "I saw an opportunity. I thought if Victoria went to jail, we could be happy forever." Gavin let her go, stepping back as if he had just touched something infectious. The betrayal left him speechless. For 2 years, he had lived convinced he was doing the right thing for the justice of his dead son. That conviction justified all his cruelty toward Victoria, but it turned out he was just a pawn in Chloe's twisted game. He had imprisoned his loyal wife for a liar. "Gavin, we have to deny it. Let's hire a lawyer. Let's pay influencers," pleaded Chloe, crawling to hug his legs. "With what money?" screamed Gavin, frustrated. "My accounts are frozen, Chloe. My cards don't work, and now everyone knows you are a liar, and I am the idiot husband who imprisoned his innocent wife." The insistent doorbell interrupted their argument. It wasn't a guest's ring, but a long and demanding one. Gavin looked at the security monitor. In front of the high gate of the house were 2 police cars, a moving truck, and in the middle of it all, the figure that froze his blood. Victoria. She has come. The automatic gate opened, not because Gavin pressed the button, but because Victoria's team had hacked the security system. Victoria walked into the garden of her childhood home. The modern colonial-style house with its majestic white pillars looked the same, but the vibe was different. The grass was too perfect. There were new and tacky statues in the garden, no doubt Chloe's taste. Behind Victoria walked Mason, 4 police officers and 2 court officials. The main door opened abruptly. Gavin came out with a distorted face, followed by Chloe, who was still sobbing. "What the hell is this, Victoria?" shouted Gavin, trying to maintain the remnants of his authority in front of the police. "You can't just waltz in here. This is still my house." Victoria stopped on the first step of the porch. She looked at Gavin from a lower position, but somehow Gavin felt tiny. "Your house?" asked Victoria in a low voice. She turned to Mason. "Mason, please read property deed number 405 and the Donation Act of the year 2018. Mason opened his leather folder. "The land and building are registered in the name of Victoria Sterling. Absolute donation from Mr. William Sterling. There is no marital property clause as it was acquired before the marriage and has separate property status." Based on this morning's temporary court order, the legitimate owner requests immediate eviction from the property, as the current occupants do not have residency permission. Gavin's face turned ashen. But I am your husband. It's our house. Soon you will be my ex-husband, corrected Victoria coldly. And rectified. Gavin, it is my house. You have just been a guest who stayed too long and started stealing the silverware. Victoria signaled the officials. Get their things out, only clothes and personal items. All furniture, paintings, electronics, and jewelry bought with company money stay here for the audit. You can't do this, screamed Chloe. She tried to lung at Victoria, but a female police officer stopped her firmly. I am the lady of this house. Victoria looked at Chloe with a look that froze blood. You aren't a lady, Chloe. You are just a parasite that latched onto the wrong host, said Victoria. You have 30 minutes to pack your bags, or I will have my men throw them in the street. Taking back your space is the first step to taking back your soul. Victoria. Gavin looked at her, searching for some trace of the sweet woman he once knew. The woman who always made his coffee in the morning, who massaged his feet when he was tired. That woman was dead. Victoria, Gavin's voice softened, his last attempt at manipulation. We can talk about this calmly inside, not in front of the police. Vic, I know I was wrong, but Chloe tricked me about the pregnancy. I am also a victim, Vic. Victoria laughed, a short and empty laugh. Victim. Victoria took a step forward, bringing her face close to Gavin's. You are not a victim, Gavin. You are a greedy man who preferred to believe his mistress rather than the wife who stood by your side for 10 years. You don't regret that Chloe lied. You regret that you got caught. She turned around, turning her back on them. You have 25 minutes left. For every minute you delay, one of your suitcases will be burned. Gavin and Chloe had no choice. Under police supervision, they ran to their room, stuffing clothes into suitcases with panic. Gavin tried to grab his Rolex from a drawer, but an official stopped him. Sorry, sir. It is registered as a company asset from last year. Confiscated. Half an hour later, Gavin and Chloe were on the sidewalk, outside the gate. 2 large suitcases and several handbags lay at their feet. The gate closed slowly in front of them. The neighbors started coming out to witness the drama, whispering. Gavin Montgomery, the CEO of Success, was now on the street like an elite hobo. From the master bedroom window on the second floor, Victoria watched them. She didn't feel happy. She just felt clean. The house could finally breathe again. The next day, the battlefield moved to Sterling Plaza, a 40-story skyscraper in the financial district. At 9 in the morning, the main boardroom on the top floor was full with the board of directors and minority shareholders. The atmosphere was tense. The coffee served remained untouched. The double doors opened. Victoria Sterling entered, flanked by Mason and Martha Halloway, who was now on parole and had joined as Victoria's chief legal advisor. Victoria wore a jet-black power suit. Her bob cut was perfectly styled. She walked toward the chair at the head of the table, the chair Gavin had occupied for 2 years. She sat down, resting her hands on the marble table. Good morning, she greeted. Her voice was calm, but dominated the room. Apologies for the chaos of the last 2 days. We are here to take out the trash. Suddenly, the door of the room was forced open. Gavin burst in, dodging security who tried to stop him. He was still wearing the wrinkled suit from the day before. I am still the legitimate CEO of this company, shouted Gavin out of breath. This meeting is invalid without my presence. I built this company for the last 2 years while she was in jail. Built. Victoria arched an eyebrow. She pressed a button on the projector remote. A graph appeared on the giant screen, a red line plummeting. During your 2 years of leadership, Gavin. Victoria began her presentation as if Gavin were an incompetent intern. Net profits fell 40%. Short-term debt increased 200%. And most interesting, Victoria pressed another button. A list of suspicious transactions appeared. There was a flow of funds of $1 million to a company called Chloe Interiors, a shell company owned by Chloe Reed. What is this for? Interior consulting services, read Victoria with a mocking tone. What interior design costs $1 million? Remodeling hell. The shareholders murmured uneasily. Gavin's face paled. He knew those funds. It was the money he had used to buy Chloe an apartment and a luxury car without it being tracked as a personal asset. It was a business diversification strategy. Gavin tried to excuse himself, but his voice was weak. It is embezzlement. Gavin, Martha cut him off abruptly. Federal law, and since you did it in the exercise of your position, the penalty is aggravated. Victoria stood up. As holder of 90% of the voting shares, I exercise my right. The only item on the agenda is the removal of Gavin Montgomery as CEO with dishonorable character and the filing of a lawsuit for damages for all company losses. Agreed, exclaimed one of the oldest directors, who had long hated Gavin's arrogant leadership style. Agreed, chorused the others. Gavin stood paralyzed in the middle of the room. He looked around looking for an ally, but the people who flattered him before, who laughed with him playing golf, now looked away. In the business world, there are no eternal friends, only interests. And Gavin no longer had any value. Security, called Victoria calmly. Please escort Mr. Montgomery out and make sure he takes nothing but the remains of his dignity, if he has any left. Two burly security guards grabbed Gavin's arms. He resisted weakly, gaze fixed on Victoria. You are cruel, Vic, whispered Gavin. I learned from the best, replied Victoria without blinking. The door closed. Gavin was expelled from his own kingdom. Inside, Victoria sat back down. Well, gentlemen, let's talk about how we are going to save this ship, said Victoria, opening a new chapter for her father's company. Room 204 of the Turnpike Motel was small. It smelled of stale tobacco and the air conditioner made a noise like an old tractor. Gavin sat on the edge of the bed, whose springs dug in, staring at the peeling wall. On the floor, his luxury suitcases with designer clothes piled up, ridiculous in that filthy room. It had been 3 days since they were kicked out. Credit cards didn't work. The cash left in Gavin's wallet was barely $300, a pittance for someone who used to spend that on a single dinner. His Mercedes had been repossessed by the financing company the previous afternoon. Turns out, Gavin hadn't paid the installments for 3 months. The money had been diverted to cover Chloe's lifestyle. It's too hot here. I can't sleep, complained Chloe. She had just come out of the bathroom whose tap was dripping. Stop complaining, murmured Gavin without turning around. Stop complaining, exploded Chloe. She threw a wet towel at Gavin's face. All this is your fault. You said you were a business genius. You said Victoria's assets were under your control. And what happened? You are just a puppet. Without Victoria's signature, you have nothing. Gavin pushed the towel away abruptly. He stood up and shoved Chloe against the cheap wooden wardrobe. My fault, shouted Gavin with bloodshot eyes. Do you have a mirror? All this has crumbled because of your lie, Chloe. If you hadn't faked the fall, if you hadn't staged that dirty theater, Victoria wouldn't have gone to jail. We probably would have divorced amicably. I would have gotten part of the marital assets, and we would still be rich. But no, you were greedy. You wanted to see her destroyed. And now look who is destroyed. I did it for us, replied Chloe, screaming through tears. I love you, idiot. Love. Gavin laughed bitterly. When the money runs out, so does the love. You loved my credit card. You loved the status of Mrs. Montgomery. Now that I have nothing, do you still love me? Chloe stayed silent. Her eyes moved nervously, avoiding Gavin's gaze. The painful silence filled the room. Chloe's unspoken answer was more hurtful than a slap. I knew it, hissed Gavin. He sat back down, burying his face in his hands. Gavin. Chloe's voice changed, becoming calculating. We can sell my jewelry, my bags. They still have value. We can flee abroad to Mexico or France. They withheld our passports, Chloe, said Gavin wearily. A friend in the police told me. Victoria moved fast. We are under surveillance, waiting for the summons. Chloe collapsed on the floor. Her face was pale. The image of jail, the place she laughed at when she visited Victoria, now haunted her. She imagined a narrow cell, rancid food, and a cold floor. I don't want to go to jail, Gavin, she sobbed. Do something. Call Victoria. Apologize. She loved you. She was a fool in love. Surely there is a way. She isn't a fool anymore, replied Gavin, staring blankly out the barred window. "She is a monster we created ourselves." The sound of a police siren was heard in the distance. For both of them, it sounded like a funeral bell approaching. The office of Mason Brooks and Associates was a hive of activity. Stacks of documents piled on the conference table. Victoria signed the last sheet of a file 2 inches thick. "Here it is," said Mason, closing the red folder. "The request for review of the sentence before the Supreme Court." "The new evidence is very solid," added Martha, taking a sip of her coffee. "The original medical record, the testimony of the nurse who has finally decided to speak for fear of being implicated, and the recording of the missing security camera, of which the old head of security fired by Gavin kept a copy." Yes, Victoria had located the head of security. Turns out Gavin fired him without severance a week after the incident. Resentful, the man kept a copy of the hard drive as life insurance. In the recording, it was clearly seen. Victoria and Chloe were 6 feet apart. Chloe looked toward the camera and then let herself fall deliberately with the technique of an amateur movie stuntman. "With this proof," continued Mason, "your conviction will be annulled. The state must restore your good name, and history will record that you were never guilty." "That is for the past," said Victoria calmly. "Now for the future." Mason handed her a second folder. Black. Police complaint number LPB-09-81222025, read Mason. Defendants, Gavin Montgomery and Chloe Reed. Crimes charged, perjury, false accusation, falsification of annual accounts, and money laundering. Cumulative penalty, asked Victoria. For Gavin, with embezzlement and laundering, it could reach 15 years, answered Martha. For Chloe, as the mastermind of the plot that led an innocent person to jail, judges will be very severe. Maybe 7 to 9 years. Victoria looked at her signature on the letterhead paper. The black ink was still fresh. Once, she signed the marriage license with her hand shaking with happiness. Now, she signed the death warrant for her ex-husband's life with a steady hand. "Send it," ordered Victoria. "Now?" asked Mason. "Now?" replied Victoria. "I want them to receive it while they eat instant ramen in that filthy motel. I want them to choke on reality." Mason nodded and handed the file to his assistant to take to the precinct. Victoria approached the office window overlooking the skyscrapers of Manhattan. The sky was cloudy, but for her it seemed clear. "Justice is slow, Martha," murmured Victoria. Martha stood beside her, putting an arm around her student and client's shoulders. "It is slow, darling, but it has a very cruel sense of humor. When it arrives, it hits where it hurts most." Victoria smiled slightly. "They took 2 years from me. I will take the rest of their lives." Victoria's mobile vibrated. A message from an unknown number. "Victoria, help me. Gavin hit me. I want to be a protected witness. I have more evidence about the bribe to the judge Gavin made. Meet me. Chloe." Victoria showed the message to Martha and Mason. "As you suspected, Martha," said Victoria coldly. "Rats start eating each other when the ship sinks." "What are you going to reply?" asked Martha. Victoria typed a brief answer and turned off the mobile. Victoria's answer: "Save your story for the police. I don't care." A torrential rain fell over New York that afternoon, as if the sky cried, or perhaps cleaned the sins of the metropolis. In the lobby of Sterling Plaza, the atmosphere was silent despite being rush hour. Employees, who normally hurried, now walked slowly. Their gazes were pinned on a point in the middle of the grandiose marble lobby. There, kneeling, was a man they once feared and respected. Gavin Montgomery, shirt half-buttoned and hair disheveled, was on his knees on the floor. He didn't care about the whispers of the employees he once yelled at, nor the security guards looking at him with a mix of pity and disgust. His gaze was only fixed on the VIP elevator door, which had just opened. Victoria walked out. The sound of her stilettos resonated. Click, clack, click, rhythmic like the ticking of a death clock. She wore a black trench coat, elegant and untouchable. Beside her, Mason was alert, but Victoria raised a hand, signaling him to stay back. Gavin crawled on his knees toward her. "Victoria." Gavin's voice was raspy, broken by contained crying. "Victoria, help me. They are looking for me. The police are outside." Victoria stopped 6 feet from Gavin. She looked at her ex-husband, not with anger, but with the look of a scientist observing a dying insect. "Stand up, Gavin," said Victoria with a flat voice. "You are in the way." "Forgive me, Vic. I was wrong. I was stupid." Gavin prostrated himself, his forehead touching the cold marble. "That woman bewitched me. Chloe planned it all. She forced me to bribe the judge. She falsified the evidence. I still love you, Victoria. Remember our 10 years of marriage? Remember when we started from zero?" Victoria laughed softly, a cold and penetrating laugh. "We started from zero," she repeated. "Correction, Gavin. I started from zero. You were just the handsome passenger. And about love, you don't love me. You miss my credit card. You miss the power of my signature. You miss the safety I gave you. No, I swear to God. Don't bring God into this." Victoria cut him off abruptly. She crouched a little so her eyes were at the level of Gavin's bloodshot ones. "2 years ago, when I knelt at your feet, begging you to believe me when I told you I hadn't pushed Chloe, what did you do? You pushed me away. You spit in my face and let the police drag me away." Gavin stayed silent. His body shook violently. The memory hit him. "Now," whispered Victoria, "you are feeling 1,000th of my desperation back then. Enjoy it. It is my goodbye gift." Victoria straightened up and addressed the head of security. "Mr. Garcia, please clean up this trash and allow the police officers outside to enter." "Victoria." "No, Victoria." Gavin tried to grab her leg, but 2 guards held him firmly. From the revolving door of the lobby, 4 uniformed police officers entered with handcuffs in hand. "Gavin Montgomery," said a policeman firmly, "you are under arrest for alleged crimes of money laundering, embezzlement, and perjury." Click, the sound of handcuffs locking. Victoria didn't turn back. She walked toward her car waiting for her, leaving Gavin behind as he was dragged out, accompanied by the flashes of cameras of journalists waiting at the door. The interrogation room of the precinct was cold and smelled of stale tobacco. On one side of the metal table, Chloe Reed was sitting, hands shaking, holding a plastic cup. Her face, usually radiant, was now dull. Her eyes were swollen. Across from her, a seasoned detective stared at her, while Mason, present as the complainant's lawyer, observed from behind a one-way mirror in the next room. "Ms. Reed," said the detective, "the medical proof is conclusive. You faked a pregnancy and a miscarriage to send Mrs. Sterling to jail. The penalty is 7 years, but you could get a reduction if you cooperate to uncover a bigger case." Chloe swallowed hard. She knew it was her only exit. Gavin was finished. There was no point being loyal to a sinking ship. "What guarantee do I have, detective?" she asked in a low voice. "We will propose you as a cooperating witness to the district attorney." "Your sentence will be reduced," replied the detective. "We need proof of Gavin's implication in bribing the judge in the trial 2 years ago." Chloe took a deep breath and rummaged in her purse, which had been confiscated, but she was allowed to access its content. She took out a small pink USB drive. "Gavin thinks he is very smart," said Chloe. Her voice started to sound bitter and vengeful. "He deleted all chats and emails, but he forgot something. I handled the transfers. I always made backups of everything, as insurance for my future." The detective took the memory stick and connected it to a laptop. The screen showed a series of cryptocurrency transfers and phone conversation recordings. Gavin's voice. "Recording. Listen. The judge needs another $100,000, so the sentence is the maximum. Take them from the company marketing funds. Victoria has to be in jail at least 2 years to give me time to transfer the waterfront lands." Chloe's voice. "Recording. But that is risky, honey." Gavin's voice. "Do it and period. Or do you want us to end up poor? As soon as she enters the cell, we will be king and queen." Behind the mirror, Victoria, who had just entered, froze. She suspected Gavin was evil, but hearing her ex-husband directly plan her destruction with such coldness was still painful. "Bastard!" hissed Mason beside her. In the interrogation room, Chloe continued her betrayal. "And it's not just that, detective," added Chloe, eyes shining with malice. "Gavin also ordered someone to cut the brakes of Victoria's old lawyer's car so he couldn't attend the first appeal hearing. I have the chats with the thug he hired." The detective was stunned. The case expanded from domestic fraud to organized crime and attempted murder. "Enough," said the detective, closing the laptop. This is enough for Gavin to rot in prison for life. Chloe smiled relieved, thinking she had saved herself. Thank you for your cooperation, Ms. Reed, said the detective coldly. Your status is now officially detained and charged. We will present your cooperation request, but remember, you are still the mastermind of the fake miscarriage. Don't expect to walk free. Chloe's smile vanished. But I helped. Helping to uncover another crime doesn't erase yours, sentenced the detective. Take her to the holding cells. As they took Chloe out, she crossed paths with Gavin, who was being led to the room next door. Their gazes met. There was no love, only the pure hate of two predators devouring each other. 3 months later, at the New York Supreme Court, the room was packed. The case had become the trial of the year. Society, outraged by the injustice suffered by Victoria, filled the surroundings of the courthouse with support banners. Victoria was sitting in the first row. She looked calm, dressed completely in white. Beside her, Martha squeezed her hand tightly. The presiding judge, not the same one as before, the previous one had been removed and was now also accused, banged the gavel to start the reading of the sentence. Gavin and Chloe were sitting on the defendant's bench, separated by 2 officers. Gavin looked gaunt. His hair had grayed. His eyes were sunken. Chloe kept her head down, crying silently. Ready for sentencing! The judge's voice boomed. Victoria's heart beat strongly. The moment of truth. Defendant Gavin Montgomery is found guilty of bribery, money laundering, and fraud, causing harm to third parties. The judge took a deep breath. And the defendant is sentenced to 15 years in prison and a fine of $3 million. The room erupted in murmurs. Gavin collapsed in his chair, as if his spine had been ripped out. 15 years. He would get out at 50, without money, without family, an old ex-con. And defendant Chloe Reed, continued the judge. Chloe looked up, hoping her status as collaborator would help her. Guilty of perjury and false accusation resulting in the deprivation of liberty of a person. Although the defendant has acted as a collaborator with justice, taking into account her active role and malicious intent as the initiator of the deception, the defendant is sentenced to 6 years in prison. Chloe screamed hysterically. No, it's not fair. It was Gavin who forced me. 6 years. Get her out of here, ordered the judge. Gavin didn't scream. He only turned to look for Victoria in the crowd. Victoria didn't look away. She looked him directly in the eyes and nodded slowly. A goodbye. A period at the end of a sentence. As they took Gavin through a side door, he saw Victoria standing, surrounded by camera flashes, smiling. Smiling for real for the first time in 3 years, Gavin realized it was the last time he would see the sunlight. 1 year later, Victoria was on a large plot of land on the outskirts of New York. Behind her, a new building, pleasant and modern, had just been finished. A sign at the entrance said, Justice Bloom Foundation, Legal Aid and Empowerment Center for Women. It is beautiful, ma'am, said Mason, who was beside her. Mason was no longer just her lawyer, but also the operations director of the foundation. This is just the beginning, Mason, replied Victoria, smiling. This building will be the home for voiceless women. Women like me, silenced by the system and their partners. Victoria had sold the Sterling Group. She didn't want anything to do with a real estate business full of bad memories of Gavin. With the money from the sale, plus Gavin's assets the state returned to her as compensation, she built the foundation and invested in green technologies, a quieter sector. The name Victoria Sterling was now known as a philanthropist and activist, not as Gavin's ex-wife or a victim. She had rewritten her own identity. That afternoon, Victoria went to the cemetery. She placed a bouquet of lilies on her father's grave. Dad, whispered Victoria, caressing the tombstone, it is all over. Your fortune has returned and is being used for good. Our name is clean. A soft breeze blew, swaying the tree leaves. Victoria felt peace. The revenge that once burned her chest had extinguished, replaced by a wide and serene relief. She didn't live to destroy Gavin anymore. She lived for herself. Her mobile rang, a calendar reminder, monthly visit. Victoria smiled sideways. There was one last thing she had to do to close the cycle perfectly. Bedford Hills Correctional Facility. The atmosphere in the visiting room was noisy, but for Victoria it felt silent. She sat on a cold metal chair, separated by thick glass. A familiar position, but now the roles were reversed. The door opposite opened. Gavin entered, escorted by an officer. His appearance was pitiful. He had only been in prison a year, but looked 10 years older. His hair was buzzed short due to lice. His face was rough and dark, a scar on his temple, probably from a fight. His aura of arrogance had disappeared, replaced by the pleading look of a beaten dog. Gavin sat down. He looked at Victoria with watery eyes, as if seeing a savior angel. He picked up the intercom receiver with shaking hands. Victoria picked hers up calmly. "Victoria?" Gavin's voice sounded distorted in Victoria's ear. "Thank you for coming. I knew you would come. You still care about me, right?" Victoria stayed silent, letting Gavin speak. "This is hell. Vic." Gavin started to cry. "They beat me. The food is garbage. I can't take it anymore, Vic. Please help me. File an appeal. Now you have contacts. Or at least send me money. My commissary account is at 0. I'm starving." Victoria looked at this man, the man she once adored, the man who threw her into a place like this without remorse. "I didn't come to save you, Gavin." Victoria's voice was clear and calm. Then, Gavin was stunned. Victoria took a brown envelope from her bag and pressed it against the glass. "It is a copy of our divorce decree, now final, and the act of liquidation of marital assets. The court has decided that since you were the cause of the divorce and committed a crime against your wife, you receive not a single cent." Gavin's face decomposed. The hope for money vanished. "And one more thing," continued Victoria. "I came to return this to you." Victoria took out the white gold wedding ring Gavin had given her, the ring she had kept in the deepest drawer. "The officer will give it to you later," said Victoria. "Sell it. Maybe it will give you enough to buy tobacco and ramen for a month in the commissary." "Victoria, don't do this," sobbed Gavin. "I am your husband. I'm sorry." Victoria stood up, adjusting her jacket. "Before, you came to visit me every month, hoping I would break and give up," said Victoria, staring into Gavin's eyes through the glass. "Today, I came to make sure you see that I am whole, happy, and that I won." "Victoria, wait." "When will you come back?" shouted Gavin, desperate, as Victoria began to turn around. "Don't leave me alone, Victoria." Victoria stopped a moment and turned slightly. "Forgiveness is overrated. Sometimes justice is the only closure that actually heals. There will be no more visits, Gavin. This is the last one. Enjoy the rest of your life in the box you built yourself." Victoria hung up the phone. The connection cut. Behind the glass, Gavin screamed soundlessly, hitting the glass, begging, crying. But Victoria was already gone. The heavy iron door opened, letting the brilliant sunlight welcome her back to a world she finally owned. She took a deep breath, inhaling the true air of freedom, unburdened and without a past to haunt her. Victoria walked toward her car, where Mason waited with a knowing smile, and as the vehicle pulled away, the gloomy prison building shrank in the rearview mirror until it was nothing but a speck of dust. The flower had bloomed completely, and the iron bars had only been the fertilizer that made it stronger. This story is a work of fiction, yet it echoes the real battles fought by those who reclaim their dignity from betrayal. Let it stand as a reminder that kindness is not weakness, and true justice is often simply letting people face the consequences of their own actions.